Men jag heter Sonja och jag kommer från Brahmakumaris i København. Och hjärtligt välkomna här i aften. Jag vet att när man ska introducera ett meditationscenter så ska man ju se riktigt rolig och fredfyllt ut och sådan ge ett gott intryck. Men vi har alltså haft halvandet år riktigt meget at lave här i förbindelse med klimamötet. Så jag vet inte vad rolig jag ser ut lige nu. Fordi vi har 10 gäster på besök och vi har massa radiointervjuer, vi har gudstjänster och vi har haft workshops och foredrag och telefoner ringer hela tiden och så vidare. Så hvis det nu ikke er nogen, som har husket at sætte den på lydløs, så kan I jo gøre det nu. Fordi jeg tror faktisk, jeg har husket det selv. Men sidste Jayanti her, som sidder ved siden af mig, den formelle introduktion, det vil jo være at sige, at sidste Jayanti, hun er leder af Brahmakumaris europæiske afdelinger, kan man sige. Den kontinent, Europa og Mellemøsten. Og hun har mediteret, så hun var 19 år. Og det bliver til endnu 40 år i alt meditation hver dag, tidligt om morgenen. Så hun har masser af erfaring. Hun er også vores repræsentant for FN i Genève. Og rejser meget på konferencer og rejser rundt mig i verden til forskellige lande og foredrag og så videre. Men det finns ju också en annan slags introduktion att ge. Det är att syster Jayanti, hon är min syster och hon är min vän. Och jag har lärt riktigt mycket om meditation av netop hende. Fordi när jag selv lærte att meditere, så bor jag i London. Og jeg kunne ikke finde ud af det, fordi tankerne løber afsted i alle retninger hele tiden, når jeg skulle meditere. Så min første meditationsoplevelse havde jeg faktisk sammen med sidste Jayanti her, og jeg oplevede fred i sindet, det som vi taler så meget om på centret i København. Så ja, jeg tror måske det er, hvad jeg skulle sige. Vi vil have 2 meditationer her i aften, så sidste Jayanti stopper på et tidspunkt midt i at lave meditation. Og så tager vi en meditation til sidst, og så mulighed for spørgsmål. Så jeg tror, det bliver sådan i aften. Så velkommen. Understood that, didn't you?
Everything.
Yes. You need to put the microphone on or something? Robert will come and put the microphone on. Maybe we can have a minute of silence when Robert do that. Thank you. It's on, okay. Just to start. Thank you.
I'd like to begin with a greeting of peace. Om Shanti. Om is a sound from within, I am, and peace is Shanti. And so let's begin with just centering ourselves. We've been all involved in a dozen things, 1,000 things through the day, so we leave all that outside and come back inside and just focus at that center point of peace within the self. Thank you. It's a very momentous time to be here in Copenhagen at this moment. I read in one of the newspaper articles from London that this is perhaps the largest media event since the Olympics. And about 5,000 journalists from all over the world are present here. And it's very, very visible. Whether you're at the Bella Center or at the Climate Forum, both these places, you just see constantly cameras, little ones, big ones, and microphones everywhere. And you ask, well, what's going on? And you realize that the world's vision is focused on Copenhagen at this moment. And what the world wants to see is something to change. And this is the expectation of everyone. It's time to change. Different people have come here with very different expectations. And all of you would have been seeing this big banner, Climate Justice, outside the Lutheran Cathedral, but also in many other places everywhere. And so it spawned a whole new library, a whole new vocabulary, different words that I hadn't connected in this particular way. I'd never heard of the term climate justice before. I'd never heard of mitigation in the context of anything to do with climate. So it's been a very powerful experience being here for the last 10 days. And I haven't learned Danish in 10 days. But I'll share with you just a few of the cameos that have been imprinted in my mind. And maybe starting with something that Mr. De Boer, who's heading up the conference, has said, and that's been reported in the newspaper of the conference, COP15. And within that, he's reported as saying that this isn't a crisis of climate. No? You thought that it was. And he goes on to say, it's a moral crisis, not a climate crisis. And then yesterday, I was hearing Mr. Rajendra Pachauri, the Nobel laureate who heads up the IPCC, and his beginning statement was that he was talking to a group of business and industrial people at the Bright Green Forum. And what he said there as his opening statement was that why is it that business and industry should be concerned about climate change? Well, what is business and industry going to do if the whole of society has failed? There's nothing that can be done in terms of business at that moment. And so it's the responsibility of the whole of society, the whole of civilization, whether it's government, whether it's business, whether it's people on the street, to do something about this now. And he was talking about how the changes that have already happened have had an impact that we don't yet see. Because what happens, and it was interesting to hear this, that the impact that's happened in terms of heat, in terms of the oceans, we don't know when the effect of that is actually going to be felt, because there's a time lag. But the heat has already warmed up the seas down below to 3,000 feet. And so as that heat begins to cause thermal expansion within the oceans, now even if there was zero emission from now, but yet still all the heat that's been built up within the oceans, you can't predict what the impact of that's going to be. Because his comment was that when human beings do something, then you can maybe measure and predict what the impact is going to be. But when nature has been impacted, then what the repercussions of that are going to be, what's going to be the impact of nature on nature, we can't predict and measure. And so you can see that on the one side there's a great deal of anxiety and this stress and tension being felt. We have to do something. We have to do something now. And on the other side, there's a huge wall of resistance of people who don't want to let go, who don't want to change, who want to hang on. And I'm not here just to talk about climate change. There are experts in all these places who can tell you more about all of this. One last impression I've collected over the last 10 days. There's been a meeting of spiritual leaders gathering concurrently as the political leaders. But of course the connection has been, well, what does religion have to do with politics and climate change. And again, a statement that's been reported from the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon. And what Mr. Ban Ki-moon has said is that whatever impact governments can have on people is whatever it may be. But the impact that the religious and spiritual communities have on people is incomparable in terms of its length, its breadth, and its depth of impact. And so religious people gathering together to ask the question, and they'd come from all over the world, what can we do to bring about change within the consciousness and awareness of our communities? And Nobel laureate Professor Wangari Maathai addressed us at one point at the National Museum of Denmark, and within that she had a very interesting comment, because for 3 decades, I've known her for 2, but for 3 decades she's been working with the environment, as you know. And she went back to Genesis, and she said that if you just look back and see what's been written there, God created day 1 something, day 2, 3, day 4, and then finally he came to the human species. And of course, in his wisdom, he knew absolutely what he was doing. Humans couldn't survive without all the other things. And so all the other things were put in place just as a parent would want to give comfort to their child. And they would make sure that all the preparations had happened before then the child is born, even to receive the child in comfort. In the same way, God prepared everything and then put human beings there. But he didn't put human beings to aggress the world in which humans were to live. But human beings were given stewardship. They were given responsibility to care. They were custodians. And somewhere along the line they forgot and started to aggress and dominate. But her point was that the whole world can manage without human beings. And so it's not a question of the survival of the planet. It's a question of the survival of the human species. Because the earth can manage very well without us. We came last within the whole sequence. And so they existed before we came into existence. And so she was saying how when we begin to understand that we're part of this whole system, then instead of wanting to dominate, we realize our responsibility to the environment. And so you can see how ideas that we've held for maybe hundreds of years, or maybe just in the last 100 years especially, it's time to change. And it's not just religious, spiritual leaders who are telling us this, it's people of science, people of the environment, people of politics who are telling us that there's a need for this. I just want to address one other issue that's, again, really making us ask the question, well, what's going on? What's happening? And I'm thinking about the economic crisis. And again, during that period when, after several months of this had been going on, I started reading in the media something that was very interesting. And again, people in positions of knowing what was happening, the inside story, they were now saying, and it was being printed in the press, that it's not a crisis of the economy, but it's a moral crisis. So here you have the ecological crisis, the climate crisis, and we hear it's a moral crisis. Here it's an economic crisis, and again we hear it's a moral crisis. Pollution, population, stress, tension, These are the words that are the buzzwords of the moment, and they have been so for a little while. So what's all this telling us? Moral crisis? What does that mean? Well, maybe what it means is that instead of thinking about the standards of human life and civilization, which would be moral standards, maybe we've forgotten about that. And what we've come into is a very, very external situation in which moral standards get lost, and instead money and position and possessions and power become very externalized, and they become the guiding light for society. Different scriptures have told us about these times, in the sense that the scriptures refer to the time when mammon, money, becomes God. The scriptures refer to a situation, and I'm talking about East and Western scriptures, but we are told that when people forget about truth and people just get caught up into artificial things. Now, does that remind you of something that's happening at the moment? Sounds a little bit familiar, doesn't it? And so what are we going to do about it? At times the problem seems so enormous, which in a way it is, but it makes us feel a little helpless. Well, what can I do about all this? There's nothing I can do. And yet it was the social scientist Margaret Mead who told us that never imagine that a small group of committed citizens can't bring about change, because in fact throughout the history of humanity, that is the only thing that has brought about change. A small group of committed citizens. And so here tonight, on a cold, freezing night when it's dark, and I'm sure you have 1,000 other things that could also be very interesting to do, you've chosen to be here. So I see that if the title is what attracted you to come here, you know that it's time to change, and there's a certain commitment that you've already indicated by your very presence of being here, that you are interested in change. Then for me the question comes, well, who can make change happen? Generally, across the world, governments are interested basically in their own survival, their own party survival, and not so much in the question of serving their own people, let alone serving the world. That's definitely not part of their agenda. The United Nations, well, maybe it's the best organ we have this far, and maybe it's the only body that actually can have an impact and bring together world leaders in the way it's doing today. But yet we also see that their hands are very much tied behind their backs. They're very much facing restrictions by the nation states, which is understandable. And where the mandate of the United Nations in the preamble begins by saying that we, the peoples of the world, well, today the NGOs had a letter from the Secretariat to say that, and this is at the Bella Center, that they were going to restrict the numbers of people from NGOs who were going to come to 7,000, I think, something like that, because they were aware of huge numbers of delegations coming in. And so we, the peoples, and the peoples are made to stand outside in the cold, and they're not able to come in. That's the reality of the situation, which I understand completely. But it just begins to give you a flavor that if you're thinking about transformation happening from the top down, at this point of time it seems very unlikely. And in fact, it doesn't actually happen that way. Usually it happens, like Margaret Mead said, from the bottom up. And that's interesting, because this is exactly what I'm observing. It's young people, old people, middle-aged people. If you go into any one of these places, there's a very, very high energy level amongst the NGOs. And you'll find people of all age groups there, very, very enthusiastic, very, very eager, and very, very committed and determined to make things change. So to me, it's clear that it's people who bring about change. It's not a structure that changes itself. It's the people that can make structures change. Another very important quote that's been coming by that you're all seeing, I'm sure, and it's coming from the NGO Forum in particular, and they're talking about system change, and some people are talking about systemic change. And so the whole system, the systemic change, right from all the way from the bottom through to the top, time to change everything. And people like you and me, not here in an official capacity in any way, but I think we understand this, that the whole system needs to be changed. It's not possible to look at one bit here, one bit here, one bit there, and another bit there, but everything's interconnected, absolutely. And so total change is needed. And who's going to bring about that change? I think it has to be you. And again, it's easy to point the finger out there. You have to change. But like Mahatma Gandhi had said, when we do this, we forget that 3 fingers are pointing here. And so the reminder is that I have to change. And again, quoting Mahatma Gandhi, there's a very powerful expression that always stays with me that he used 60 years ago. And he said, "Let me be the change that I would like to see happen in the world." Which means that if my desire is to see a world full of peace, how's it going to happen? It's going to happen if I change and I make sure that I maintain a state of peace within myself. Then there is hope that there can be peace in the world. And you'll say, one person? How can one person do anything? There was a very interesting marketing exercise that I was exposed to a few years ago, and it was actually by a very young man. We were planning a big event, and we had a gathering of about 2,000 people. This is in London. And these 2,000 people are committed meditators, but we were planning to have a program for 10,000 people at Wembley. And some of the people were a little bit concerned, and we had only a few months in which to prepare for the program. And Wembley had told us that normally people organize things here 2 years ahead. And we started planning in January for a program in September. And we were confident it was possible. And by the time we got our act together and got the material ready, it was by then June already. And this meeting of about 2,000 people was happening in June. And this young man who knows a little bit about marketing came up to talk to the gathering. And he said to people, write down the people you meet every day. Just a quick list of their names. Then write down a list of the people you meet, maybe sometimes once a week. And then another list, people you meet from time to time. So maybe in the first list is your family, your colleagues. Then in the second list are your friends. You don't meet them every day, but you meet them maybe once a week. And then the people you meet maybe sometimes when you need them, your doctor, your dentist, and your chiropractor, and so on and so on. And he made people just continue to write lists in this way. Okay, write down the names of people you meet maybe just once a year at Christmas or New Year celebrations. And he said, now just see how many people you have on your list. And you'll see that probably each one of you has a minimum of 50 people, 80 people, 100 people that you're in contact with continually. Now, all you have to do is send each one of them an email to say that this program is happening. That's it. And you'll have contacted at least 100 people by the end of this process. And each one of you contacting 100 people, we can fill Wembley with 10,000 people, twice as much. And for sure, we had more people than we could accommodate in Wembley that night. It was an overflow that we had to have. And so it is a reality. Each one of us is in contact with a big, big circle. You know, when you throw a pebble in a pond, how far do the ripples spread out? In the same way, that's the number of people you have contact with, and the ripple is spreading out further and further. And sometimes ripples are merging, your ripples are merging with my ripples, and so the energy is reinforced. How long does it take to have that sort of impact? Well, this isn't a question of sending out an email, but a reality is that if I change, it impacts all the people who are in contact with me. And so we have a slogan, when I change, the world changes too. What I'd like us to do is to have a few minutes of silence, of reflection time, in which I'll guide us into meditation. And you can see how each one of us, if you've never meditated before, that's also fine. It's okay, because this is a very, very simple method. I'm going to just simply ask you to follow the ideas that I share as I speak and let your mind move in the same direction. And you'll be able to see how, just with the power of our thoughts, we can have a massive impact on what's going on. Sitting quietly, as the body becomes quiet and still, I focus my attention on the light within and become aware of the energy within the self, the inner being, the being that I am. And in this awareness, the speed of my thoughts slows down, and I can select the thoughts I would like to have. And at this moment, I select the thought of peace. I hold peace in my mind, and peace becomes a feeling. Not just a thought, but I can feel peace deep inside my own being. And in this awareness of peace, I can send out vibrations of peace out to the people I love so that they may experience peace. Peace radiates out to my human family, the entire global family. And peace touches those hearts who are ready to receive. Together, we send out vibrations of peace to nature, to all forms of life, to the world around us, so that nature may return to a state of peace and return to a state of harmony. And again, cooperate with humanity. We have created upheaval and chaos in nature. And now, as we send out vibrations to nature, peace restores calm, and harmony can return within the entire system. Holding this peace in my awareness, I come back to the consciousness of the things around me here, in this room. And again, very much here, I stay in contact with the peace within. Thank you for joining this exercise. Perhaps it's demonstrated to you how it is we can contribute to whatever it is that's happening in the world around. Whether it's the climate, whether it's the economy, or whether it's the stress that's around us. But when I am peaceful, then I can share that peace with the world. And how can I be peaceful? Question. It's great to think that yes, when I am peaceful, I can give peace to others. But how do I become peaceful? How often have I stopped to look inside myself and give myself the time to look at what's going on within? For most of us, there's such a huge demand on our time and energy that all of it is given. And we forget that if I don't have any inner strength, I'm not going to be able to be of the best use that I could be otherwise. And so tonight is a reminder that I need to give time to myself. And when I begin to do this, then I begin to understand what's going on inside myself. And I even begin to love myself and value myself and respect myself. And when I do this, again, there's something very, very powerful that happens. Within spirituality, there's a very simple principle that's absolutely a fact. And that is that whatever is going on outside is a direct result of what's going on inside. And on one level it seems very logical, and on the other level it seems, again, a little bit overwhelming. Are we responsible for what's going on out there? And fortunately, and unfortunately, both, that is so. Fortunately, why? Because when I accept responsibility, then I can do something about what's going on outside. When I don't accept responsibility and I say, it's nothing to do with me, then I can't change it. And so, unfortunately, yes, we've been responsible for what we see happening out there. But at this moment, when I accept that, then I say, yes, I can now do something about what's going on. And so this is why this is the time to change my awareness, my perception, and my attitude, so that first and foremost, I stop moaning and blaming and complaining. How often is it that we blame and complain? It's really become a culture of this, hasn't it? But accepting responsibility means that I stop wasting my energy in blaming and complaining. You know, people are concerned about wasting the energy of electricity or wasting the energy of heat or whatever it may be. And in fact, this word energy is a very interesting connection between the world outside and the world inside. And so, yes, the awareness of conservation of energy out there, but also we've forgotten about the conservation of the energy inside. And we haven't even been aware that we need to do something about it, never mind conserve it. It's not been on our agenda at all. And so when I stop blaming and complaining, I stop the energy leakage that's going on, and I'm able to save that inner energy. And in fact, when we were talking about moral crisis, etc., what that's saying is that when we've forgotten about our own inner being, and where do morals live? They don't live outside. They don't live in any material situation. They don't live in any matter. Morals are the prerogative of the human spirit. They belong to the world within, the human being, the spiritual being, the being that I am. And so when I forget about the inner being and my attention is just focused on matter and the externals and the physical identity, I've lost contact with not just spirit, but that which spirit contains, and that is my values within. And when we express those values in our life, then we call them moral values or morals, call it what you will. But looking inside, giving time to the self, means I rediscover the values that I hold within myself. And the original values of all human beings, of all civilizations and all traditions are the same. They are not different. They are the same. I remember when we were wanting to honor the United Nations 50th anniversary, and we wanted to do a book taking up the theme of the dignity of the human being, which comes in the preamble of the UN Charter, that they want to reaffirm the dignity of each human being. So our point was that, well, if I look at myself and see, well, what does my dignity depend on? Surely it depends on the values that I hold and the values that I live by. Am I right? Who agrees? Good. Okay, so our point to the UN was that our dignity is connected with our inner values. And so we'd like to honor the UN anniversary by having a book published which takes up all the different values. And they said to us, whose values? And we said, well, there are universal values. And they said, well, show us. So we did. We took up 12 different values that people in 60 countries, this is now way back in the 90s, and at that time our organization existed in about 80 countries, but about 60 countries had responded, 66 I think, when we sent out this question to all of them, which are the 12 most important values within your country? And the first 9 were identical, and the last 3 were different, and then we had to grade them according to numbers. But the first 9 came back identically from all the different countries, and 66 is a pretty large number in terms of the world map at that time, which wasn't as vast as it is today, in the sense that the number of countries has increased considerably because of all the divisions that have happened. But at that point, we had this information back from all the different continents about the values, and then from spiritual teachings, we were able to put together all these different values and their definitions, and the UN accepted that, yes, these are universal values. And so I'm not even going to talk about 12, but you can actually bring it down to just about 5. 5 basic aspects of the human being, which are the foundation of civilization through history and universally across the globe. And I don't think we could get into arguments about this. I think they're pretty clear. And then, yes, the 5 can multiply, and you can go into 12, you can go into 60, you can go into however many you want. But the basic 5 would be peace, love, truth, and a word that's not heard very often, but it encompasses many things: purity and happiness. These would be the 5 basic values that every human being has, and these then get translated into our life and in our actions. But what happened to them? We forgot about peace being inside, and we think that peace is something you have to buy. Strange, very, very strange situation. I won't comment on what happened in Oslo last week, but that was very interesting. But peace is something within. And then when I connect with myself internally, then it expresses itself outside also. Love. Now that's become a commodity, a package that can be bought and sold, right? That's what some people think it is, that you could buy love, but not true. Deep within our hearts, when we have a moment to reflect, we know that love is something of the human spirit, and it's something internal. Truth. You can search and search in the Himalayas, in the forests of the Amazon, in the deepest oceans. You can read all the scriptures that exist, and ultimately you'll come to the conclusion that truth is actually there is something within. Yes, all of these things externally can guide me and can show me, but when it comes to the reality, then it has to be whatever there is that I'm willing to accept within myself, and the truth is that which I'm going to live by. And so truth is that which is there within, which can be my compass, which can guide me. And of course we forget about that, and then the compass doesn't stay straight. It gets deflected through our attachments and our desires, and truth gets forgotten. Purity, a state of cleanliness in which the soul is really completely free, and so is unpolluted and is completely clean, like a mirror. And so a purity in which I'm able to see myself, and I'm able to know what it is I have to do. And so peace and love and truth and purity and happiness. Now maybe that's the most tricky thing, because advertisers tell us that if you buy this, if you do this, if you go here, you win this, that's going to be happiness for you. And definitely the whole thing of bigger and better and more is what's created the problems that we have today. And so happiness isn't something out there. They did a very interesting research in Britain a little while ago, and they were looking back at records of research that had happened in the 1950s, immediately after the war, and in the year 2000, so the start of the 21st century. And the findings were published just about a year ago or so. And what they found through all that research is that Britain at that time, most families didn't have a refrigerator. Climate warming is a reality. Most families in Britain didn't have a refrigerator, but didn't miss one. They didn't need one. Most families had just one television set, and it was black and white, and it was probably quite small. Most families didn't have cars. And then the year 2000, and there isn't a home without a refrigerator, even a very simple working class home. Television, well, instead of one, probably everybody has a television in each room, and they're big, and they're color. And the number of cars is not just one car per family, but very often 2 cars per family, maybe more. And they were looking at the happiness that people expressed. And in the 50s, people said that, yes, they were happy. And certainly it wasn't the material comforts that they had that made them say this. And in the year 2000, a very small percentage of people actually said that they were happy. So what's going on? Happiness is definitely not something that you can buy. It's not something that you can go and take off a supermarket shelf. But happiness is something that's within, and is very much connected with my own inner feelings and the way in which I see myself and my own spiritual capacity and power, because in that state of spiritual power, I deal with situations as they arise, and they don't bother me. I don't get disturbed by them. My happiness, my contentment stays intact. And when I've lost my spiritual power, then you see all the problems that have arisen in the world out there. Do you have something called road rage in Copenhagen? Yes? Well, it's not such a strong answer, in the sense that if I would ask this question in London, everybody would say instantly, yes. Because we have a population of 15 million, and trying to get across from one end of the city to the other end of the city, or even from one bit of the city to another bit of the city, is not so easy. And a journey that you thought might take you 15, 20 minutes, it takes you maybe 50 minutes, 55 minutes. It's unpredictable. You just don't know what to expect on the roads anymore. And about 20 years ago, maybe 15, I heard about road rage in Miami. And I said to myself, such a thing can never happen in London. And guess what? About 5 years later, everything sort of moves across the Atlantic with time. And so about 5 years later, yes, I was beginning to hear about road rage. I was seeing it for myself on the roads, but not just road rage, office rage. Somebody in front of you takes a little bit longer over the photocopier, and you're waiting in line to get your turn. And there's road rage, office rage at that moment. And so it seems as if the fuse of human beings has become shorter and shorter and shorter. Have you noticed this? Our tolerance capacity seems to have grown less and less and less. And it's because we haven't given time to recharging our inner battery. And so a battery that was full, just living life, and gradually the energy level decreases, and then of course all the wastage of energy that we have, not just in terms of living, but all the waste thoughts and waste energy, and the levels probably are now at that point where they're rock bottom. And so we are seeing all the things that we are today. And so for me, the answers are unlikely to come from outside. The situation can really only be resolved. The systems change, the systemic change, all of that can only happen when human beings change. And within that, I can never say, you have to change. Or I could say it, but it's unlikely that you're going to listen. The only one I can guarantee is going to change, if I want it, is myself. And so time to change is very much a lesson that we have to give attention to at this moment. And so how do I change? Time to reflect and see what's going on. And I can begin to see why it is I'm reacting. Instead of being able to be a creator, I've just become a reactor. And we prize creativity very, very highly in our world. But we've forgotten that the very start of creativity is inside our own minds. We are the creators of our own thoughts. We are the creators of our world within. And as we change the quality of our thoughts, so then we're able to have a change within our attitude, our perception, our words, our actions, our relationships, and the world in which we live. It's absolutely a straight line from what's going on inside to what we see happening outside there. And so how do you change thoughts? Well, ask yourself the question, where are thoughts coming from? And today, most thoughts are coming to me from outside, which means that things happen out there. I hear people saying all sorts of things, and my thought pattern changes according to what I see and what I hear, which means that if things that are not pleasant happening outside are going on, then the quality of my thinking is not very positive, is not very pleasant either. I hear things that are maybe a bit uncomfortable, and again, my thoughts are in reaction to all of that. And what's happened is that I've forgotten that the world outside is out there. And my inner world is within me. It's inside. And I can be responsible and create whatever thoughts it is I choose. Possible? Possible? It is possible. And when I accept the responsibility of being in charge of creating my own thoughts, yes, then I can start changing my responses. Then I'm not reacting, I'm responding, but my responses are now quite different. my thoughts arising from deep within myself, when I'm connected to my own core values within, then emerge in a very different way. And so whatever I see happening outside, if I'm in touch with my inner core value of peace, how am I going to respond? I'm going to respond with peace, not with violence, not with aggression. There was a very interesting discussion that the religious leaders had, and that was the whole question about anger. And people were talking about holy anger. And I thought to myself, well, surely holy anger is what has led to all the holy wars. And they still continue till this day. And so then the question was, well, if we don't have anger, are we suppressing something? No, not at all. You're transforming something. And the deep core state of being of the inner soul is that of peace. It's not of violence and aggression. And in fact, I as a spiritual person absolutely am committed to that and believe that deeply. But in 1986, during the International Year of Peace, they had experts from across the world when UNESCO had its gathering in Seville. And people who had done research into the subject were asked the question, and they came back with their research. What is the natural state of the human being? Is it aggression or is it peace? UNESCO. And the answer came back that the state of being of the soul is that of peace. And Frederico Mayer, who was at that time heading up UNESCO, then continued with that whole program of a year of tolerance, a decade of tolerance, and then a little while later, the culture of peace. And now, of course, he's heading up a foundation that's called a culture of peace. And so very much a scientific researched fact that the original state of every human being is that of peace. Well, what made me forget it? I forgot myself. I began to think I was this, and I lost touch with myself, and so I didn't remember that my natural state is of peace. And now I come back to the awareness of my spiritual identity, not just the human, but the being that is within. And in that awareness of the inner being, yes, I can come back to a state of peace. If I'm in touch with my core value of peace, what's going to be my response to a situation? That which is within my being. Then it's going to be a natural response of peace. It's not that I'm suppressing anger, but the natural state of peace which is there within is going to emerge. And the same thing with love. Love expressed in action is compassion. Passion, but connected with the self. And so what's happened today is that certainly in a place like London, people have forgotten very much about compassion. It's approaching Christmas time, and people will be singing hymns and carols, and compassion and love will be very much part of the story. But Christmas time is a time that there's the highest suicide rate in Britain. Christmas is a time when people really feel the greatest amount of loneliness. That's the reality of that part of the world, at least. Maybe not here, but certainly there. And why is that? And that's because, yes, I can say that I love you, or I can say that I care for you, but unless I'm in touch with the core of my being, and I can do this only through time spent with myself in silence, which is meditation. Meditation isn't emptiness. Meditation isn't my mind going blank. Meditation isn't just focusing on one word, a sacred word, a holy word, or whatever it may be. Meditation isn't just focusing on an image, but meditation means going within, connecting with myself, and having a dialogue with myself. So your thoughts are flowing, they're moving, there's an energy that's generated, but it's moving in a very specific way. It's moving inwards and it's moving upwards. Because first step, my communication with myself. Second step, my communication with the divine. And so we use this word yoga, union, communion, communication, community. You can see why communities have been broken apart. And that's true in the country in which I was born. I grew up until age 8 in a family in which it was my great-grandmother, my grandparents, and my parents. Just imagine. And then we moved to London, and it became a nuclear family. And now from even a nuclear family, my brother's in the USA, my mother's passed on, and thankfully at least my father and I are in the same place. But for most families, that's true. One person here, one person there, and the other person there. So where's the community? And that's just a very external state of affairs. But going back, union with myself, union with the divine, it's something that we've forgotten about. And so silence, time for myself, means connecting with myself. And then, yes, when I'm connected with the love, there is a natural fountain that's flowing deep inside, but I have to access it. And so silence gives me the possibility of connecting with it. Then that love is able to flow out. And it's not love with a price tag. It's not love with a condition that I will if you will. It's not a contract. It's a genuine experience of being able to give. Again, happiness. They say that when you give, it multiplies. And it's true. When you give happiness to one, it comes back to you in abundance. Their good wishes, their good feelings are very much with you. And you feel content and happy that you've done something for another. And so it's appropriate that as we approach Christmas and we are surrounded by these beautiful lights, we remember that it's this light in here that has to be lit, so that then we can connect with the light of love, the light of truth, and the light of peace that is there within our own inner being. And so definitely it's time to change. I'm very hopeful, or maybe that's not even the right word. I'm absolutely convinced that even though it's a period of great darkness, the period that we're in now is actually a transition period. And we are moving towards a time when there will be day. Nothing lasts forever on any level. Change is what the world is all about. And we're seeing on an external level terrific change happening, and we're scared about what the future holds. But if you look at the seasons, after the darkness of the winter, then spring begins. And it's a very dramatic change that you see, where you've had lights on at 3:30 in the afternoon, and then the light begins to grow and grow and grow, and the day extends, and the light is there with you for how many hours? Many, many hours. And so at this point, even though it seems to be a time of darkness, dawn is beginning to surface in many different places. We're seeing people talk about things in a way that I haven't heard before in all these years. We're seeing many people beginning to take an interest in things like meditation, whereas before, 40 years ago, it wasn't even a term that we were using in our common language. people beginning to be interested in vegetarian diet, whether for health or ecology or spirituality, for whatever reason. But changes are happening in a very powerful way. So the message is that the day will surely begin. That even though we're not seeing visible change happen, as we change within ourselves and we impact those around us, we will see change happen out there also. Thank you. Om Shanti.
We were hoping that some of you might have some questions. And after the questions, we will have a meditation together. And then finally, to finish the program, we have something. Many of you have been to our talks before, and you know by the end of it, you can have a little sweet we have made and a little personal card. So when we sit in talks like this, it's a big collective experience, but to take that experience more personal, Brahma Kumaris have a very wonderful strategy for that. And it's that everyone comes up and gets a little personal card from Sister Jayanti to share personal energy and not in the whole room. So that's the plan for now. So let's see if anyone has any questions. Hannah will help me with the microphone. And you just put your hand up and you get the mic. You can put it in Danish or in English. We'll translate it. I know it might be a bit scary to ask questions in big gatherings, but here's one brave one.
Well, I'm going to break the ice. We had a author here in Denmark with a somewhat quasi-crooked philosophic mind, and he wrote a bon mot, which would probably sound so in English, translated. Formerly, we had to believe, because we didn't know better. Today, we don't even dare to believe what we already know. Does that appeal to some thoughts?
It's absolutely true. We're scared to believe. It's a fact. For example, I know that when I share something with another, it brings me great happiness. And yet, I'm scared to do it because I wonder, will I have enough for myself tomorrow? And so we don't even believe the things that we know anymore. And so that's absolutely true. It applies very much to the situation we're in now. Thank you.
Hi. I would like to ask, you were talking about these 5 things: peace, love, happiness, and truth. And I can't remember the last thing, but I'm thinking about this truth. The truth is individual, isn't it?
I believe that there is a being who is the truth, the supreme, the divine. And as we connect with the divine, we're able to awaken the truth that is there within ourselves. And as we're moving on our journey, yes, I may say that this is my truth and this is your truth, but ultimately we come to the one truth. But as we go along our journey, it's important also to respect that your truth is valid and my truth is my own. But I believe that those parts converge and we come to that one absolute truth ultimately.
Divine. It's the divine truth, or what? Okay, thank you.
Yes, I want your comment, because in Denmark we had a famous Niels Bohr, and he said, the truth is complementary. And as far as I hear you saying, keep accumulating your inner peace and the world around you will change by itself. Actually, that was Daddy's words, I remember. And then my question is, it's so beautiful to say like that, but on the other hand, or side of the complementary, action is so important. And then there is the grace, maybe in both or between. I want to come to that.
I'd like to share a story of something that happened some years ago. And it illustrates this idea of peace and action. And what had happened was that this was in the 70s, in fact, not even 80s, it was in the 70s. And we were driving very early in the morning. We'd started a journey at about 4 o'clock, and we had to get to a place by 8 o'clock in the morning. And this was by then about 6 o'clock. And it was around February, March. So it was about 6 o'clock that the light was just beginning to come up. And we were passing through this village. And I was in the middle, in the back passenger seat. And I could see through the screen very far down the road. And there was this man who seemed to be wanting to cross and then stopping and then coming and stopping again. And as we came closer, I could see that it was an old man who was dithering. And then the next thing I knew, there was an impact, and our car must have hit him, and he must have decided he wanted to cross at a moment that was not right. And having hit him, the car then hit. It ricocheted, it hit one of those three-wheeler auto rickshaws that you have in India. And hitting that, it ricocheted again, and it came and hit a tree and stopped. And first, is everyone in the car okay? Everyone seemed to be okay. We came out. And the next, where's this old man? And going across, then it was clear that a very quiet, sleepy village road was suddenly full of people, full of men. And there was a lot of noise. And yes, he was being looked after. People had called the ambulance and the police, and everything was in hand. And then I looked for the driver, and I couldn't see the driver anywhere. And I asked the brother who had been with us in the car, where is he? And he couldn't tell me. And then I noticed that there was a lot of noise in one particular area. And something within me told me I had to go there, and I would find the driver in the middle of that crowd. And I went to the gathering, this big crowd that was quite noisy and quite scary in a way. But there was a very powerful motivation that was moving me, and I just headed. And somehow, whether it was seeing the white sari or a woman, whatever, but the crowd parted every time I came to the group, and a passage was cleared. And I came to the man. The driver was in the middle of the crowd, and they were just starting to beat him. And they were saying, you people come into our villages and kill our people and things like this. And I went and stood in front of him with my arms open out and in very bad Hindi, broken Hindi. I was telling them, stop, just wait a minute, the police are coming. And that's all it needed. It needed just that fraction, and I think they were just too shocked, and so they stopped. They didn't know what to do. And it just needed that space of a few minutes, and the police did arrive, and they were able to take him off, and however the wheels of justice moved, they moved. But those few minutes in which there was peaceful action probably saved that man's life, because when you're in the middle of an angry crowd like that, you don't know what's going to happen. And so I was absolutely peaceful, but it was a very powerful peace that was motivating me and driving me to be there. And that vibration of peace just stopped them in their tracks, whether it was shock or whatever, as I say, but they just stopped. And so if I just sat on the outside saying, oh, I have to be peaceful, nothing would have changed. Things would have gone on in a very negative way. But it was peace, but it was a lot of determination. I had to be there. And so peace doesn't mean that you sit by and let negative things happen. But peace means that you have the power and the clarity to do what you need to do. If I just become distressed and upset, nothing. If I'd got angry, I'd have just joined the violence of that crowd. Anger cannot combat anger. But I had a very, very powerful demonstration that it's the power of peace that can work.
Hi. I wonder if you could share some of your thoughts about how to live in enlightened spiritual relationship.
How many hours do we have? It's a question of life, isn't it? But a very simple guideline. How do I live my day? Just my routine. And we begin the day very early. I won't tell you how early. But if you begin your day maybe an hour earlier than you do usually, then that gives you enough space to have a chance to be with yourself, to make contact with the divine, and to be able to fill yourself with that spiritual power and energy. And then, after that time of silence, if you read something that is going to nourish your mind, whether it's a scripture, whether it's something of inspiration from a book, whether it's whatever it is that you find that uplifts you and gives your mind something that's going to be feeding it with goodness and truth. And then you begin your day having prepared yourself for the day. Then definitely it's going to be your own inner qualities of peace and love that are going to guide you. And the other thing that happens is that when you've been able to fill yourself, then you enter into a relationship with another, not out of a neediness and an emptiness and a desire to take from them, but you're in a position where you're able to give something to the other. And so the quality of interaction is quite different. And so a healthy relationship can evolve further from that. But also the rest of the day too, the quality of your work, the quality of your interaction with your colleagues, again, is very different.
Okay, last question, and then we have meditation. Thank you.
Yes, hello. I'm sorry, I'm quite new to this, so if my question is quite foolish, you have to apologize with me. But I understand that you are speaking about a lot of common values that represent the human being, but I don't hear you say that we are all common, you know. So perhaps you could elaborate on the elements that define the unique human being, the unique human spirit, on the aspect on how you could perhaps elaborate a little bit on that.
When you think about the 4 basic primary colors, and then you think about the whole rainbow of colors that are the multicolors of the world in which we live, you can see how the combination of different variations of the colors creates a wonderful variety. And I feel that that's a little bit the same what happens with human beings too. Yes, the basic constituents of the human spirit are the same. I absolutely believe that totally, that there's goodness and beauty in every human spirit, and it's comprised of these qualities. It's like, the body is made up of carbohydrates and proteins and water and air and all of this. But yet still, given that each one's composition is a bit different and unique, in the same way, these are the basic qualities of every human spirit, and then the way these get mixed in and the way that we express these things are then unique to each one. And I also appreciate not just the commonality and the thing that binds us all together in this eternal link, but also the fact that every human being is absolutely individual and different. And that's because the combination and the way these qualities are used are different in each one. But it's not a foolish question, a very important question. Thank you.
I said it was the last question, but if anyone really wants to ask another one, that's fine. Yeah, Kel.
I'm not sure how to express this in the right way, but my experience in finding or in searching for inner peace, I've experienced that I need people close around me that I really trust in, that I can really open up, and that I feel that we need this open and honest circle of people around us to go into this, because when I open up inside, I also experience a lot of fear and anger and things I have to hold, to have courage to hold, and I need people around me to really to stand by me, not to take care of me, but just to be there, to me to feel strong, because on my own I'm not strong enough to do this, and that I feel a lack of in this country, or I miss that more honesty and more courage.
You're absolutely right. When I was speaking about the preparation inside, I was speaking about it on a very individual level, but also within our own community. Everywhere in the world, we have centers where people come together each day. And that little community, whether it's 4 people, 12 people, or 300 people like we have in London, that community becomes the support system in which everyone is moving on a spiritual path together. And so each one is facing the same devils that are there within. And you rightly said that you discover the anger that's there within, you discover the fear that's there within. So yes, all of these devils come up, and it's within the spiritual community where you know that others are also journeying on the same path that you feel comfortable and secure to be able to share these things and take support and help. And so we share time in meditation together. but we also share the same lesson each day together in a class. So we don't even call it anything else, we call it a class. So every morning we begin with time to study in a class together with other students who are on the same path. And that's very, very valuable and helpful. And there's a group that meets together here in Copenhagen too that you can find out about.
Okay. Thank you for good questions. And I think what we do is I tell a few practical things, and then we have meditation, and then after that you can come and take your card. And the practical things, they are that this talk tonight has been recorded, and if anyone of you want a DVD or you just want the sound, you can order it. The table on the right-hand side down there has the order list, or you can send a mail to us, and if you want to have it. Tomorrow is Sister Jayanti's last day participating in the climate meetings, and this civil society forum, climate forum, det heter Klimaforum 09. They are having their activities in DGI-byen and in Øksnehallen. They are having morning meditation tomorrow with Sister Jayanti at 8 o'clock. We know in our center we have it at 6. It might be a bit too early for many, but they have it at 8. So if you want to have half an hour meditation with Sister Jayanti tomorrow at 8, and then she will share something about self-empowerment, and 8:30 to 9:15, you're most welcome tomorrow. And the hall is just actually near to Øksnehallen. It's not in DGI-byen, because they have 2 venues. And at 10 o'clock tomorrow, Sister Jayanti here, and one of our project managers for solar energy from India is going to share a workshop, a platform tomorrow at 10. It's also in Klimaforum 09, som er DGI-byen og Øksnehallen together. And for those who are new here, you're most welcome to visit our center in Copenhagen. It's Vodrosvej. It's close to Planetarium. And we have meditation morning and evening and courses, and you can read all of that in our leaflets. And I think that was it, wasn't it? So Sister Jayanti actually asked me to do the meditation, and I will do it in Swedish-Danish sort of thing. And I think one of the reasons is that maybe she wants you to have one in Danish, but also that she can sit silent and send very special vibrations into the room, which you can't do when you speak. So if you want to sit up and relax a little bit, and you know, we meditate with open eyes, and here on this stage you have so many beautiful things to look at. You can look at the stars or at that picture, or you can actually rest the gaze. You can look at Sister Jayanti in her light in her forehead. You have many options, but pick one of them. And thank you. And a little music maybe. Så begynder meditationen med at slappe af i kroppen. Jeg sidder opret på stolen. Og slapper af i benene. I maven. I skuldrene. Lad hænderne hvile tungt på skødet. Slapper af i nakken og i ansigtet. Musklerne er i panden, omkring munden. Trække vejret dybt et par gange. Og giv lidt slip på en lang dag. Med mine tanker bliver jeg fuldt til stede her i værelset. Jeg mærker stemningen her i det her smukke lokale. Den stemning vi skaber i fællesskab. Vi gør det hver for sig. Skaber stemning med vores tanker. Men vi gør det også i fællesskab. Alle sammen. Jeg lader julelysene og stjernerne minde mig om mit indre lys. Så jeg går ind i mit eget værelse bag ved panden. Jeg retter mine tanker indad og finder mit private sted i min bevidsthed. Det finns en plads i min bevidsthed, i mine tanker, hvor det er rart at være. Det finns et stille sted, hvor jeg kan slappe af. Hvor jeg kan give slip på alle de ting, jeg skal gøre og alt, jeg skal nå. Det findes et sted i min bevidsthed, hvor jeg bare kan være mig selv. Dette sted i min bevidsthed er fyldt med fred og med kærlighed. Det er ikke altid, jeg kan mærke den fred og kærlighed. Nogle gange skal freden og kærligheden have lidt hjælp. De behøver hjælp med mine tanker, fra mine tanker. Hvis jeg tænker på, at det inderst inde er jeg en fredfyldt sjæl, så hjælper jeg mig selv. Hvis jeg minder mig selv om, at stillhed er vigtigt for kreativitet og balance, så hjælper jeg mig selv. Sidste Jayanti talte også om kærlighed og medfølelse. Jeg sidder her et øjeblik og giver kærlighed til mig selv som en sjæl. Jeg påskønner min egen værdighed. Mit eget værdi. Jeg påskønner min egen eksistens. Jeg har medfølelse for mig selv. Jeg værdsætter mine intentioner, på trods af at resultatet ikke altid er det samme. Og som en sjæl er jeg også forbundet til den højeste, til det guddommelige. Så på samme måde som jeg kan mærke forbindelsen til de andre her i værelset, så er det en forbindelse til en højere sandhed. Til et højere lys. Til de universelle værdier. Jeg ved, at der er mange lyde i salen, men det er reality. Der foregår lyde derhjemme, og så lyde, når man mediterer. Det er aldrig helt stille udenfor. Men lad os se, hvis vi kan finde stilheden indenfor. Det stilles der, og lyset tændt. Og jeg føler nærvær, en højere energi, en højere sjæl. Jeg lader kærligheden tage over. Kærlighedens varme lys sænker sig ned over mig. Gør mit sind stille. Jeg lader freden bo i mit hjerte. Jeg gør mig klar til langsomt vende tankerne tilbage. Så jeg afslutter meditationen med at lukke øjnene et øjeblik. Og bare mærke efter, hvordan det er at være mig lige nu. Hvordan det er at tænke på denne måde. Og jeg bliver bare siddende helt stille. Skal vi lige ordne nogle ting heroppe. I beholder roen i sindet. Vi lader musikken spille. Så gør vi os klar til at afslutte.